Well, speaking of budgets, let's talk about your budget. Let's talk about your household budget. Let's talk about the budget of workers. South Africans going to have to tighten belts as the interest rates are continuing to increase. Expectation today between 25 and 50 basis points. Unions are not happy at all, though. They say the Reserve Bank must stop fighting inflation by starving the working class. Let's get the thoughts then of SAFTU's national spokesperson, Trevor Shaku, joining us this morning. Trevor, good morning. I appreciate your time. So regardless of whether it's 25 basis points or 50 basis points, SAFTU not happy. Why do you think the Reserve Bank is doing this deliberately?
Look, thank you for having us. The problems with the South African Reserve Bank is that they use a school of thought that tells them that they've got to always use the interest rates as the tools which they have to contend and fight inflation with. And in our view, this is problematic, especially in the context of an inflation bout that has not originated really from demand side and demand factors. So we think that what ought to happen is that the South African Reserve Bank has to discard this method of interest rates because in our view it's very regressive. It's very regressive in the sense that when you implement interest rates, you are, of course, making the cost of borrowing much higher and expensive. And when you do that, two elements or two sections of our society are affected. The first one is small businesses, but the second one is workers. But the workers are affected because that they have to increase debt servicing costs and shift money from other essentials of their households to service the debt. But secondly, you have the intermediate period, the impact of inflation, the impact of interest rates is very inflationary because what it does is for instance, on small businesses, what happens there is that small businesses try by all means to absorb the debt servicing cost through pricing. And when they do that, the products they produce become expensive and as a result contribute to very inflation that the interest rates in the first place were trying to resolve. But secondly, what happens is that those who are not able to absorb these debt servicing costs through pricing go into defaults, bankrupt, and close shop. And when they do that, what happens is that they increase unemployment because there are retrenchments in that particular process. So
it's a terrible cycle that the country finds itself in, Trevor. I don't think anybody would disagree with what you're stating as facts as to what impact it has on households, workers and small businesses. Allow me to ask you this, though. If the Reserve Bank doesn't increase the interest rates by 25 or 50 basis points, what we're expecting is an increase in inflation as well. So if you don't want interest rates to go up, how do we manage inflation?
Yeah, so ours is an alternative to the interest rates. We think that instead of trying to realign demand and supply by starving the working class, by targeting the reduction in the aggregate demand, you have got to look at the supply side, especially because all of them have come out to say that the problems here of this current inflation have been supply bottlenecks. Whatever they mean by that, they will tell us. But what, in our view, this means is that the problems of inflation at the current moment are arising out of supply factors, and this is because of the decline in production as a result of many factors, including COVID-19 in the recent past, which led to, in some instances, total collapse of certain businesses, but also a real decline in production throughout. Of course,
you would agree with me, just in closing, though, that the SA Reserve Bank can only work off of the mandates and the programs that have been put into place by national governments. So the Reserve Bank is only reactionary at this point, both to economic factors and also local political factors. Should this not be a government issue to be taking this up with and not aiming at the SA Reserve Bank? Last answer as I say goodbye to you.
Yeah, so we think that the Reserve Bank is one part of the government institutions, and together with the Treasury, which coordinates fiscal policy, they have to coordinate to ensure that they power the idling industrial capacity so that production takes place, where supply would then exceed demand and have deflationary pressure on the prices of goods and services. You can't fight inflation with interest rates when we are showing that they are regressive. You have to ensure that the supply side is improved, and the only way to do that is to power the 21.9% of the idle industrial capacity in the country and ensure you expand production. And with that, you are going to solve the problem of inflation without having to go the route of interest rates.